This webinar is produced in cooperation with SAPC. The Security Awareness Professionals community is a group of industry experts who manage security awareness programs. Members cover all industries and are spread across the US, Canada, and the UK. And by AwareForce. AwareForce delivers engaging cybersecurity videos, quizzes, infographics, and breaking news that keeps employees informed and reduces cyber risk. Delivered twice a month as a newsletter with additional social media and intranet-ready formats, AwareForce seamlessly integrates with your existing cybersecurity program. Cost-effective, easy to use, it empowers your team with a deep library of content that employees love to read. Completely branded for your organization, AwareForce includes real-time metrics on employee engagement and can support you during cyber insurance negotiations. AwareForce. Engage, educate, protect. In 2025, cybersecurity insurance is more important and more complex than ever. With cyber threats evolving constantly, companies are confronting ransomware, data breaches, and business disruptions. Insurers now demand proof of strong security measures like employee training, robust protocols, and more, even before offering coverage. It's no longer just about having a policy, it's about proving you're proactive. Navigating cyber insurance takes preparation and vigilance. So how do you best position yourself when negotiations are approaching? That's our topic. Our guests are Ralph Pasquarello. Ralph brings over 15 years of expertise in cyber insurance and risk management, a trusted advisor to the FBI and U.S. Secret Service Cyber Fraud Task Force. Ralph also collaborates with the Georgia Tech Research Institute. Since joining the Tech Collective 2 years ago, Ralph co-created the CARE Report. It's a thorough assessment designed to help you understand and handle the complexities of cyber insurance and cyber liability risks. And Craig Sikowski. Craig is a dynamic leader with over 25 years in IT, insurance, and fintech. As head of the Tech Collective, he drives innovation and partnerships with Fortune 500 companies. Craig has presented cyber solutions to the U.S. Secret Service at the Atlanta Cyber Fraud Task Force and serves on influential technology boards. And your host. I'm Richard Warner, 35 years covering business on Fox, Gannett, and PBS, nationally syndicated radio commentator, nearly 20 years hosting cybersecurity summits across the U.S., and for nearly a decade now, founder and managing editor of AwareForce Cybersecurity for Employees. And ladies and gentlemen, we are live. It's good to have you with us. There's Ralph on screen, Hopefully I will be on screen soon. Otherwise, Ralph just keeps smiling. It's good to have you with us. As I mentioned, we are live, and a reminder that the chat functionality is functional. So as we go along, if you have a question, if you have a story, good to have you with us. Let's hear from you. And let's start, and not to be glib, gentlemen, but I have an impression that getting cyber insurance these days is about as difficult as getting homeowners insurance in Los Angeles. Is it really that hard? What's your experience?
Well, actually, no, Richard, it's not that hard. As you said, it was much easier, 15 years ago. You breathe on a mirror, you get cyber insurance for $1 million. And nowadays, let's say the bar has risen a bit because underwriters and naturally the industry alone has required that more security is implemented with companies. If you don't have the right security in place, they won't insure you. The limits have gone up. Premiums are kind of flattened out recently, although, malware, we'll get into it, ransom attacks have risen quite a bit, but it's actually more affordable than most people think.
I've always heard we go back a long way, and I've heard this story, and Craig, you can jump in here. What is as difficult for organizations when they get hacked is that they think they're going to be okay with the levels that they have, but the problem is that they are down. They're not operational for much longer than they thought. And the CFO's saying, look, we need to save money on premiums, so we'll be fine with this, when in reality, what they need is this. How do you figure that out?
Well, we do a quantitative analysis to begin with. So we start from ground zero, just like anybody who's a pilot, you've got to start from ground zero before you can figure out what the plan of action is and where you're heading. You want to figure out where you are today, what your risk profile looks like today. And the risk profile, many companies are maturing very quickly, right? You were talking a minute ago about how expensive insurance is and how hard it is to get. And I agree with Ralph. It's not that it's so hard to get, it's getting the right policies and coverages behind you. And I think as we've matured, cybersecurity has also matured. So years ago, when it was fairly new and getting sizable events, those attacks have developed and matured, as well as now your profile and your resources, your employees. So some of that has flattened out a little bit because we're better educated. Now, getting work to a year ago, maybe Ralph, you can mention some of where does that happen? You know, the ransomware attacks, malware attacks, and stuff like that. How are those covered? And give us some examples.
Right. So there are several uh, versions of cyber insurance, let's say. And there's also commercial crime insurance, which dovetails with that. And a lot of people don't realize that what's covered with cyber, what's covered with your crime policy. Um, you know, the threats continue to change all of the time. You know, years ago, you'd get a malware attack or a ransom attack, and people would push back and say, you know, we're not paying it. But now the bad guys, you know, they have hostage. They have your information, so they have a hostage. They not only encrypt what you have, but they say if you don't pay the ransom, now we have your information. What do you want us to do with it? So, you know, the game has changed a little bit. The bad guys are getting a little more savvy. Um, and of course now with AI, I mean, the attacks now, we look at the maps and what's going on in the attacks. They're up over 10, 15 million attack per day, but not successful, thank God. But it's the numbers are increasing all of the time.
You know,
Um,
an insurance company is going to sell you, and I'm being cynical here, but sell you as much insurance as you will buy. And in this case, the threats are also just about endless. So, do they tell you what you need to have? Do they make recommendations? Is that what you guys do? And if so, what do you see?
right, right. So being in the front line, being a retail insurance agent for years, the carriers, you know, you have the carrier side, you have the retail side of the brokers, which I was. And the brokers will go in and write as much insurance as you want, right, to your recommendation, or are they being in compliance? And that's a whole nother issue maybe we'll get into. But the reason they're underinsured is a lot of the CFOs are buying insurance to be in compliance with a contract. When the crap hits the fan, right, and we find out that the actual financial cost of it was 2x or 3x, um, it's just a bad day all around. The carriers are not going to suggest, well, you know, Richard, you have a $10 million policy. I think you should have 15 or 20. That's not the insurance carrier's job. And it's what's lacking and it's what's broken that we've found for the last 15 years. It's broken. So there has to be somewhere where that protocol gets corrected, where, like Craig said, we go back to the beginning and let's see what, you know, do a financial risk quantification and see what's at stake. And this way we can insure for that. We give you parameters and we benchmark you on that. So that way, at least you have a starting point to be
What do
safe.
you see in terms of downtime? What do you guys, it's probably a best case scenario when you're discussing this in the boardroom at an organization. Oh, I think we'll be fine with this. But what do you see?
Ralph, you
Well,
could.
it varies. Go ahead, Craig.
No, I think you're going to go right into it, and I've got a couple of things I can tee up for you as far as the the type of risks that you need to take a look at for that downsize. But go ahead, Ralph.
No, I'm, the reports that we get, we rub elbows with a lot of the legal guys and the government guys, and the reports that we're seeing, even on the web, is 24 days, somewhere to 30 days. We had an issue recently in Atlanta. It was a large construction company, and they were down for almost 6 months on paper. All the computers and all the information was wiped out, and they were still doing a paper chase for 6 months. So, if you're in manufacturing and you're down for 30 days, what does that cost? It's not cheap. So depending on how big a company you are, we see a lot of the larger market, the enterprise companies, they're 80% of those are pretty well good with insurance, right? And most of them have insurance. But the mid-market and the small market, that's where they really, really need help. They're not fully insured. They're not getting the right advice. And who knows where they're writing the insurance at. It could be an online policy for all I know.
Does the process of getting this insurance in place, is it a burden? Is it a nightmare? What kind of experience have you gone through as you've put this stuff in place?
The application process has changed. Years ago, it was a quick application, cyber application. It might be 5 to 10 pages. Some of the better insurers, some of the better carriers had a 12 to 15 page. Now we have a cyber application you fill out. You have a ransomware application that you have to fill out. You have a multi-factor application you have to fill out, and also a cybercrime policy application. So, that 1 to 2 pages, 8 pages to fill out is now 40 pages or whatever it is, depending on the carrier now, and they're not all the same. And Craig always says it, he says, all insurance is not the same. All the policies are not the same. There's no standardization in the industry. And it's been a long time coming. So,
Craig, I heard Ralph say several things that people watching this webinar need to expect, specific things they need to have in place. MFA, I know that employee engagement is a factor. What do you need to have in place when you're going to the marketplace to get the insurance?
Well, it always starts at the employee level and the internal level and how good you are internally. Do you have all the right processes? Do you have all the right defense mechanisms, whether that's from a tech stack, a digital footprint, those being put in place? But your first line of defense, it's you and your employees. How educated are you? Multi-factor authentication. We're seeing there was a recent education hack and exposure recently,
Oh,
and
yeah.
they didn't have MFA turned on. Very simple, right? You would think, hey, that's elementary 101, and they missed it. So those are some of the foundational things that you need to do. And those are some of the things that Ralph was mentioning that are a kind of a failure to put down in the application process. They're not detailing all of those measures, helping the underwriter really understand the profile and footprint of that company.
The one that you mentioned just a second ago, I believe, was Power School, and that's making all the headlines right now. 16,000 schools, 60 million students, information, and this is like within the last week. The Aware Force that's about to come out to our employees includes background on this. Here's my question. If you were a victim of, if you were a school in this case, or if something similar and you were a hospital and your vendor, your third party was the one who got hacked and you're the victim too, how does cyber insurance play with that?
we have engaged. It's funny you mentioned that, the school system. So the educational industry, Craig and I have engaged now with 3 or 4 over the last 6 months. We have found that every single policy that we've looked at has been way underinsured. All of these school systems or private school that we did, so they're underinsured. They're just not getting the right advice up front. So yes, when it comes to PHI and personal, health information or personal information that has been exploited and exposed like this, and these breaches are in the millions of files and for people, and it gets really, really expensive. The notification costs and some of the support that these people have to be provided with after that. But it's, you do the math, don't guess. That's what we always tell people, Richard. Don't guess on what it's going to cost you when the event happens. Please, that's the worst thing you can do.
The other worst thing, which you mentioned, was don't lie. Be overly truthful.
Well, if you lie on an application and forensics come in and they find out that you said you had ABC for security, you might have it, but was it turned on? Was it implemented correctly? And that's where Craig and part of our team assist technology and MSPs in finding what we find. What are the deficiencies in the security? Also, we do an outside look at that to assist their team as well. So no, you can't lie. Absolutely not.
Okay, so you've done that. What have you found? Tell a story.
Go ahead, Craig. You want to take that?
I'll give a couple. Man, we've got so many we could be here for hours. But one story is we had education. It was a university system prior to contacting us. And you were just mentioning it. They stumbled in years previous, and they had a couple of small things happen to them. And some were being held back, some were very truthful. We said, no, tell the full story. And we'll give you a better roadmap coming in with some of our quantifications. And we right-sized them. We gave them the right measurement. We're working with some of their MSSPs and their MSP providers and doing a better framework moving forward. The underwriter, I mean, just loved to hear the story and the measurements, and they appreciated the transparency so they could work better together. They were given additional considerations by using our report, better story, having, love the term that Ralph uses, an oven-baked application process. They did a better job telling them what their profile was. And they did increase some of their limits. The CFO looked at the extra, and it was very minute extra expense, but it really was an investment into that university system, both from longevity and the protection side.
Third parties are so much a part of what we're dealing with now, and I wonder how does High Trust and other organizations that come in and assess third party, does that help you as an organization that hires a third party? Is that part of what is being looked at?
One word, absolutely. That is one of the largest and easiest things that somebody can do, putting in a high trust. Third parties are the largest exposures. And Ralph, why don't you give an example of just third party?
There's a bunch. I'm not going to mention any names, but when it comes to business interruption on an insurance policy, there are some sublimits as you go down that has dependent business interruption, or some of your providers, business interruption. So that's where the third party influence comes in, not only for you to pay damages to a third party, but for when a third party damages your company, right? Are you insured enough? Your top line for your security and network might be 10 million, but as you go down in a policy, you get these sublimits that keep creeping down. And something really, really important, like, providers, third party damages for you because someone let you down, right? So your internet provider went down and it cost you 3 days of business or whatever it looks like. So you got to make sure that a lot of those check marks, that they're covered. But the thing we cannot predict, Richard, is how much downtime is it going to be, right? I mean, we've had companies that are down for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, and they exceeded their limits for insurance in a week. So and then there's so many other things coming into effect. And we talked about business email compromise, right? Again, training your employees not to click on things. And so many times employees open up things, they're not sure what happened, nothing happened, right? That's the scary thing. Nothing happens. Well, what happened? I clicked on it, but nothing happened. So, the bad guys are in your system. And again, it's a numbers game. How long are they in your system before you find out they've been doing their, whatever behind the scenes, right?
I think we're still at 100 days, right? 90 days, 100 days
over
in the
100.
system. Yeah.
Yes, over. I mean, the last I checked, it was about 180 days that
Wow.
they're inside your system. And they're doing their recon, they're doing their works, and when it comes to invoices and all that, I'm sure that this audience is familiar with invoice manipulation. It's another thing that we fight on a regular basis, but it costs a lot of money.
But Richard, one of the main points that I can't tell you how important it is, and we run into this all the time, including CFOs. It's really cyber training. And I know Wareforce provides, that level of effort and some of that stopgap in helping them. But the best thing you can do, like anything, train, retrain, look at that, look what things are coming up, spot check, and do it on a regular basis, not just once a year, twice a year, at least quarterly. Look at that. And I think that really helps out quite a bit. Wouldn't you agree, Ralph?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
There are some great companies out there. Probably everybody who's watching this has KnowBe4 or Proofpoint or one of those, and they do a terrific job. They're very technology focused, doing phishing exercises and tracking employees' compliance with that, and that's extremely useful. Where we stepped in, to my knowledge, we're the only one who does it. That's what our clients have said, that it's all branded for the IT team. So it looks like it's coming from the good guys internally, not from some third party vendor. And there's a great deal of control that the customer has to tailor the messaging for what's appropriate culturally or factually for their organization. And what we learned from doing this was that it opened a line. This is so important. It opened a line of communication between the workforce and the IT team where the employees felt safe saying, I did something stupid, or I have this stupid question right away, not 180 days from now. But this just happened and I don't know. It's happened twice with us where employees have sent a question into the IT team and said, the CEO just asked me to send this confidential file. I don't know the CEO, but I want to impress her. Should I do it? And part of what it's got to be is fluid and quick, and that will save your butt.
Right. You mentioned the CISO or a CTO in a company, and it's more and more important now. In fact, there was an article that was just released, and the name of the article was "Who Should Be in the Room When Purchasing Cyber Insurance?" Right? Because it's usually the CFO that I'm dealing with, or maybe a compliance officer. But now they are saying that, look, the CISO needs to be in the room. The CFO and the CISO, there's a gap there. There's always been a gap there, but that needs to be closed so that they get a full picture of what can happen, right?
You said,
like you said,
Ralph,
with the training,
Ralph, you said that they speak different languages. CISOs, CIOs, CFOs.
They do. Craig, we were in a meeting in Atlanta. You tell the meeting, Craig. We had 3 different versions.
We had a healthcare provider, and we had the chief counsel, we had the CISO, the CIO, and the CFO all sitting across the table as we were presenting and reviewing the report. And they all do speak a separate language. And our report really, it levels the playing field. It's a conduit to flattening that and making sure that language barrier is flattened out. Everybody understands it. But we mentioned the word, it was compliance.
Compliance.
And the CFO said, yes, I'm compliance in the contract. The CISO said, no, they're talking about PCI and HIPAA compliance. Then the CIO said, no, we're talking about a different compliance. And I said, the funny thing is, you are all correct. And our report actually, removes all that separate dialect and puts it down. There's your exposure from a compliancy and shows you that level, that multi-tier level through that compliancy and what that means. both from a protection and exposure. So it's beautiful. We love having that interaction with all those groups in one room because now they look together and like, oh, I get it now. The CFO is like, oh, now I understand what you've been telling me for all these years and why I need to make that investment. And the CIO and CISO like, absolutely. So they love the report for one of those very simple
Well,
reasons.
that's the conversation we had with the CFO in a manufacturing facility. And we were brought in because the attorney said, you need to speak with this company. I don't think they're adequately prepared or insured. And the CFO said, I'm fine. We're in compliance. And I said, well, what does that mean? He said, well, we do business with one of the big box stores. They want us to have a $5 million policy, so we have $5 million policy. I said, well, that's compliance for a contract, but after we did our benchmarking and all that, we came up with a figure of 15 million. And actually, if they were exposed on some other or shut down, like their SCADA systems that run the factory, it could be much greater than 15 million. But they made the move from a $5 million insurance limit for cyber to $15 million. And whether that's adequate or not, that's not my job to say. Our job is to benchmark them, show them, give them an example of their peers. Where are your peers? They're not at 5 million. People that do this amount, if they're at a 500 million in production per year, a 5 million contract limit is not enough. So we need to bring that to the forefront. Yes, Mr. CFO, you're doing a great job. You are in compliance on contracts.
And you're saving money. You're not spending more money than you need because the CFO is going to want to hold the cost down.
Absolutely.
Right. But, they're under the influence that, oh, this is going to triple my premium cost now. It's not going to. You're adding layers. It's not going to triple the cost.
I keep coming back to
this. If your
this.
submissions are properly, your submissions are proper and your applications are filled out correctly and your security is where it should be, your premiums are going to favor for that. You're going to get discounts. So,
and a reminder to anybody who's watching, if you want to type a question or comment or tell a story in the chat, please do. I come back to this, and if you have a big technology provider, CrowdStrike comes to mind. Obviously, they got burned. They've learned. Did that just bring the world to a halt for a period of time there? What's the experience you're going to have if you have a very high-profile technology provider who's obviously at fault in what happened? You're Delta Airlines, and you were basically clobbered. Does that strengthen your case as the victim? Or does it all come back to whatever you agreed to on paper?
So I'm going to interject something first off. So the CrowdStrike really wasn't a cyber incident. It was more of a business interruption incident. And I think that's the biggest misnomer. And Ralph, I'm going to let you speak to this because that's one of the largest gaps we see when we first come in. Why don't you give a little detail to the business interruption side?
Well, if you look at some of the providers like that may have 500 clients or wherever, I don't know what their database or their client base looks like, but, I'm not going to mention any names. I don't want to get myself in trouble here. But I guarantee that their insurance will never account for all the damages. The insurance will never amount to where a full-blown breach is. I mean, it's just, I've seen it over and over. You read about it all the time. In fact, you don't read about a lot of it because a lot of these breaches and a lot of these exploits are not mandated to go public. Unless you're a health company, you're a PHI, or you're a finance company, and you have a certain amount of records, it's 500 when it comes to PHI, that you must go public and you must divulge what has happened. But, we meet with the Secret Service, and a lot of these guys are telling us, especially with AI right now, that majority of these are not being reported because when they go in to do their forensics, the CFO is saying, please don't make this public. We don't want anyone to know about this. And, it's up to the law enforcement to hold that as we won't. we won't make this public. It's up to you, sir, whether you want to make it public or not. So
Can you connect the dots? How does that impact cyber insurance coverage and rates for that company?
it if the first of all, the carrier knows, right? Because on your loss reports, the carrier does know that you've been breached. Now it depends on the type of breach. Was it a social engineering scam, or was it a VEC? Was it invoice manipulation, or what happened? There are so many different types of claims when it comes to cyber. Was it data theft? Was it financial a theft, right? But it will you put it this way: if you're getting dinged all the time, it's just like workers' comp, right? It's not if someone falls off the building and God forbid they get hurt or killed, your rates don't go up that much. But if you're getting people that are losing fingers every day on the job, it's not the severity, but how often it happens, right? So we know that people are going to get breached, but how bad was it, et cetera. I've never seen anyone get denied insurance after an event, but depending on how you remediate, what are you going to do different next time in order to prevent this from happening again?
How do you
What
recover
know,
from
right?
reputational damages, though, right, Ralph? Right? I mean, once that's hit, and you've got the legal costs, you've got penalties that they would have to pay, you've got internal costs, recovery costs, and then you've got the reputational costs. So that is the largest part that you really have to think about investing in yourself. It's not really what if, it's really when that happens. What do you do?
Okay, playing devil's
That's why,
advocate. I'm wondering. You mentioned reputational costs. You know, breaches are so common, and it's been going on for so long. Do those reputational costs still carry the weight that they used to?
depends on the industry, right? I mean, if you're selling shoes, no one cares if you're breached. But if you're a healthcare or you're a finance company or something that I'm depending on because I'm trusting you, right? Then yes, it does do a lot of damage, especially with the smaller companies that can't afford it. 50% of these smaller companies within 6 months go out of business after a breach or after a cyber attack because they can't afford it. They don't have the right insurance. They don't have a lot of them don't have cyber insurance. It's like 40% of small companies have cyber insurance.
So I'm going to be interested in your answer. Can they afford it?
They can. They can. They need to get directed in the right by the right people. And even $1 million policy for a small company is not something they can't afford. It's so affordable. I
Yeah.
mean, I'd rather see someone. I've told people before, I'd rather you cancel your different insurance policies and get a cyber insurance policy. If you're going to spend $3,000 or $4,000 a year on premium for $1 million policy, it's worth every penny.
So, Richard, we always like to mention this. We've met multiple leads, oddly enough, in elevators, and I always ask people, can you afford not to have it? That's even a bigger question.
Right.
But in most CFOs, like they say, you've got 30 seconds, wow me. And my one question, what if you're wrong? And how do you know you're right?
Biggest concern I would think among the people watching this right now is that the policy will not pay out if I get hit. So, what are common reason that claims are most often denied?
Negligence, negligence or non-performance with your security measures. We don't read about them not being paid. Once in a while, you read about a big one because someone's pushing back. Whose fault was it? Technology companies. You have a technology errors and omissions policy
Yeah.
that dovetails with the cyber policy, but other industries don't. So if I make a mistake, who's going to pay for it? It's if you've done everything you can to protect your company, and you've filled out everything properly and everyone is happy, I mean, I don't see a reason why a cyber claim is not paid. I've never witnessed one with any of my clients.
How about that? That's a surprise. All right. Well, I think one message that's coming through here is that when you go into this process or you go in for a renewal, part of what you're going to find is where you're lacking and the processes that you need to put in place. Is it your experience that most companies are okay with that, appreciate that, and actually follow through on it?
Well, you either follow through on it or they're not going to renew your policy. So, like I said, years ago, the even MFA, multi-factor, wasn't on an insurance application. You know, then little by little, endpoint protection and maybe some privilege access management. And, you know, as the insurance carriers mature and their policies mature, so does the standards for security, right? Um, but you can always buy some insurance from, you know, I'm not going to mention names, but that are skinny, right? They're a little bit more lenient on your security, but how deep are they? Do they have a cyber team? Do they have a task force that's going to help you when the breach happens? Do they have a cyber coach? What does the pre-breach protocol look like? And I mentioned that to CFOs and they look at me like I'm crazy. I said, what is your pre-breach protocol? Have you contacted attorneys? Have you contracted remediation? What happens? Like Craig and I, you know, we've done some desktop exercises for breaches. And we have a lot of CISOs that we work with. You may want to touch on that, Craig, if you will.
So some of that was, it's actually surprising how many people have not done a table top exercise. And that's actually bringing in certain key employees, your C-level, and engaging in a real cyber incident, whether it's a breach or ransomware, what have you, and walking through that scenario. How do you handle that? Whether it's somebody getting breached by, it's common day today, bring your own device or BYOD. So you've got to bring your cell phone in. And now I've got to put application software on my own cell phone. I'm answering my cell phone. I mistakenly provide, or I'm unencrypted and get hit. So some of that is, how do you handle that? What's the remediation process? And what are the processes being put in place? Is that device encrypted? Do you have a software to uh, remote wiping the capabilities? What's that process? How do you communicate that process? Going straight up from the CEO all the way down to that, the employee level. What's the communication? What do I do? How do I handle that? What's the backup? What's the protocol? And that's another one that we find that's often missed and not practiced. And that leads to a remediation process. It's not, things happen, you've got your incident response, but what's after that and during that? It's almost in parallel.
I don't mean to be elementary because we have some high level folks watching this, but I'm curious, is that something they know how to do? I mean, you're trying to imagine what might happen, which could be virtually anything. Is there a place to go? Is there a standard menu of things you need to be doing in these tabletop exercises? Where do you find out?
We want to make sure that protocols are put in place in training. I go back to the most basic element of training, and that's making sure that you've got your employees involved, that they understand the corporate, mantra of what to do, when to do it, how to identify. And we're all human. People make errors at times, but you've got to communicate that very quickly. You don't want to hide that because just like any embers, it becomes a larger fire if you don't. So I think that's the beginning and part of that table exercise. Do you have things documented? Is that communicated properly? And HR is a big proponent of that as well, and that those exercises.
So long as you're not making them afraid. I think one thing that we saw in the SAPC group that we're involved with helping promote this, it was interesting in the previous webinar. It was clear that one of the cultural changes that's going on, whether it's a public company or a government entity, is the change from punishment to safety. It's okay that you did that. One of the guys here, Mark, with CISA, I mean, he was talking about how he did something really stupid, and it's like, okay, we're all of us are going to do these stupid things. So imagine multiply that by the number of employees you have. What you've got to do is create a culture of safety where you're not going to get fired because you did this thing that, by the way, management is probably more likely to do than the rank and file.
Well, I got to tell you, it was really unique. I ran a, small division of a fintech company. The CTO that was the head of the whole division made an error, and we had a forum, auditorium forum, and we wanted to make sure everybody understood what was happening. He ran the scenario and saying somebody in our company did X, Y, and Z, and they did it on their mobile phone, and everybody is going, "Gosh, was it me? Was it me?" And he raised his hand and goes, dumb enough, it was me that did this. And he was humble enough to bring himself out and call himself out. But he said, I want to make sure everybody else doesn't do the same thing I did. And he said, and I had to communicate that. I had to go through HR. He ran through all the steps. And, you saw that few, type moment. Somebody at the top can make those same mistakes. And, everybody's human. So I think you could see that relaxed mode and people understood, they were mumbling. You could see people in the audience going, I would have done this. And that's like, that's right. That's the things that you should be doing. So I think you have to build a community, Richard, is really what it comes down to.
Yes. And a number of companies are doing that. They're actually putting a program in place so that different areas of the organization are represented in this community to school the CISO and others in IT who live this all the time, that not everybody does. Not everybody thinks that way. We have a feature at the bottom of every one of our editions where employees can submit questions. They can do it anonymously, or they can do it by putting in their name. And what we have seen over the last 3 or 4 years of doing this, hundreds of questions from employees, is that so many of them are becoming more sophisticated. Questions about VPNs that you never would have heard 3 or 4 years ago. So the employees understand that how important this is, and you just have to seize on that.
Well, the big question, would you leave your doors unlocked at night? You don't invite everybody in the house, right? You want to make sure you've got that locked down. So that's my first starting point.
I want to hear a couple of more
Yeah.
stories. Tell me about
No,
something, Ralph. You had remember us talking right before a holiday, and you said it's all breaking loose. It's the night before a holiday. It's a holiday weekend, and so client is calling us with their hair on fire. Are you apt to? This is where your tabletop exercise becomes very important. Uh, Nationwide Children's Hospital was impacted by the CrowdStrike thing, and they had done tabletop exercises and were able to recover on Saturday. So, tell a story about the night before a holiday or at the last minute or people's hair on fire. Do you get that a lot?
I did when I was, when I was a broker doing the insurance, I would get the call. And the only reason I got the call is because their computers were locked up and they knew no one else's personal number, like 10 years ago, I was on vacation. It was Thanksgiving and I was up in Indianapolis at my daughter's house. And I got a call on my cell phone from a client and he said, we're all shut down. We're locked up. I said, what are you talking about? He said, we've been encrypted. A ransom attack. He said, yes. And I said, well, why did you call me? He said, because all of our other information is in our computer. We can't get to it. So I said, well, that's not a good thing. And that's a question I ask people a lot of times. What happens when you get the blue screen, or when, what happens? Well, we would call so-and-so. Where's the information? It's in our computer. You can't get to your computer. So, and yes, I do get the phone calls. And a lot of times, be prepared because it is before a holiday, before a long weekend, right? I don't know why they do it, because of money in, money out, 72 hours. And there's a lot of different exploits that take advantage of that day off on holidays. And I have had several companies just call me, and everyone is screaming in the background, and all the computers are down, and there's all sorts of stuff going on, and that's why it's so important, Richard, to have your ducks in a line before the event happens. Call an attorney if I'm going to mention, or the carrier or your broker says, here's the protocol, pre-breach, post-breach. Here's the process. Call XYZ from this lawyer. I want you to establish a relationship with this law firm, because they do things after post-breach, right? I want you to establish a relationship with a forensics or incident response company, because so they know who you are. So when the phone rings in the middle of the night, they pick it up, they know who you are, and game on, right? And that's really, really lacking, because everyone worries. They think, the insurance company is going to magically appear and fix all of this stuff, and that's not the deal. It depends on who you're insured with and how deep their team is. How deep is your bench? So
Let's go to
Yeah,
the.
Richard, that's the one.
yeah.
I was going to go to the mats here because we've got some comments and questions from viewers. Mark, this one from CISA. I led an exercise with a hospital network last year, and a legal player said malpractice insurance and cyber insurance will fight when an incident takes place during a procedure. So make sure that you have your gaps shored up while they hash it out. Mark, that soundbite that we had in the previous webinar was the one I was looking for and couldn't find. That was such a crazy story. Malpractice versus cyber. Any experience with that? Any thoughts? You guys, Ralph, Craig?
Go ahead, Craig.
No, Ralph,
Well,
I think
if it's the insurance policy, malpractice versus, I've not witnessed that. I mean, uh, that's why a lot of these hospitals pay the ransom right away, because they don't want people dying because of machines not being operational or whatnot. And that's why a lot of these healthcare and hospitals are hit with the ransom attack, because the bad guys know they're going to pay right away. Um, and if records get misconstrued, or different prescriptions get switched around, there was just so much stuff that happens that's malicious. We hear about ransom attacks and things like that, but there are a lot of cyber attacks that are destructive and disruptive and malicious for no reasons other than that bad guy adding it to his resume. He didn't, there was no financial reward, but I mean, there's no rhyme or reason for some of these attacks. But I've never had that conflict between the malware or malpractice and the cyber insurance going back
a lot
and
of those
forth.
companies
So
set up
that's me.
reserves too. They want the company to be whole as fast as possible, and that reduces the level of payout. So they'll work behind the scenes and subrogate those of who's responsible. It might be a longer road. I'm not going to say it's easy, but and then getting back to paper, I think is having a plan of action. The construction company that Ralph and I engaged with, at least they had a plan. They could do something via paper. It might be legacy versus future state. They're going back to legacy, but they're still in business today, right? They haven't dropped a beat, and they're moving forward. And Richard Selfish. So that's why I like our care program, because it's a holistic view, and it goes from start to finish, and it brings in not just the company itself, but the third parties, the MSSPs, your insurance agent. It works with that strategy roadmap, and it gives a bird's eye view with everybody and all the components wrapped into one to help a CFO with that investment to really protect the financial integrity of the company to march forward. Because when you're down, I mean, that could be disastrous, right? Or it could be short term. And I think that's the benefit of part of our program, helping you make sure you can get through that very quickly and you've got the right vehicles in place.
In case
So
somebody didn't get that, that's you are not selling insurance on behalf of a company. You're
No.
representing the people who are watching this and helping them determine what to get and who to get it with.
Yeah, we're
Correct.
agnostic. We're an extra eye for the company. We work for the company, and we partner with them. And most people love us because we're agnostic. We don't have a certain point of view. We take a look at the facts, just the facts, man, and we look at all of the vehicles being put in place and how a company is working. We also compare them to their peers in the marketplace. So they now have an extra leverage to see how are they doing it and how should we be doing it. There's no perfect answer, but there are better answers than others.
And you know
Question.
what?
Go
Let me
ahead.
jump in and tell you what we've done recently and how we have reacted to the market, what our team wants, what our referral partners are asking for over and over. And Craig and I, about 3 months ago, said we need to shift gears a little bit. You know, the middle market and the enterprise is fine, but the smaller companies, and we've heard this over and over, are the ones that really need the help. So we have instituted and launching just actually this week a Care Report SBA for small business assessment, and I think that is going to be a dynamite program. And the reason too, and also we did an interview for Cyber Insurance News last week with Martin Hinton, and he's just a brilliant guy, does a great job, and we were honored to be on that podcast of that interview. But he asked a lot about the small businesses because he's hearing it over and over and over on Cyber News, you know, about all of these small companies that are getting breached. They can't afford the security, right? And they can't afford the insurance that they might need or that they might think they need. But and the brokers that are helping these smaller companies don't have the resources for cyber. You know, they might dabble a little bit here and there, but they don't have that expertise. So I think this program is really going to help a lot of the masses. And you know, that small business guy in America, that's what keeps this country running. You know, it's the mom and pops of the world in every little town that has hundreds of small businesses, and they need help. So
Question from
we're really excited about that.
Question from Chris Whitaker. Whit asks, I'd like your thoughts on mobile device risk. I'm surprised at how many large companies don't have MDM strategies in place to secure their devices, their corporate data, or they do have one but don't use it right. When it comes to cyber insurance, is it required to have MDM, mobile device management, on your devices, your employees' devices? And is that part of, to what extent is that part of the cybersecurity posture?
It depends on who you're buying insurance from. Are you buying it from the top 12 that I would recommend, or are you buying it from a note, let's call it a generic, right? Or a non-admitted, or I mean, there are so many different people out there that saying, hey, me too, we'll sell you cyber insurance. But what's their protocol look like? What are their security measures look like? If they say, well, you have to have MFA and that's it, well, I'm not sure I would buy insurance from them. I want to make sure that those security measures are top notch. And so does the insurance carrier. I mean, we all want to defend. No one wants the more breaches that you have, the more the insurance companies pay out, the higher the premiums go. So, I mean, it's a vicious circle. So let's start, like Craig said, from the beginning, make sure that your policies are right, your premiums right, your coverages are right, and then also button up on your security. And you know, your security shouldn't be here and your insurance down here. They should both be on the same level.
All right, let me ask
Richard,
you
I
both.
think
Go ahead, Craig. One more and then we'll
I think
wrap it.
Chris Whitaker, big hello, I'm a big fan of yours. But one thing that most people don't do, and that's on the application process, big gap. So to answer Chris's question as well, somebody might think they're covered even before that, where you can catch some of that is very much upfront on the application process. And you ask those questions, well, what are you doing? And that's another part that we can help with from the CARE program. Make sure that you are identifying those needs to get you with the right carrier. And we'll work with your insurance agent. You might love your agent. That's great. At least we can guide them to looking at some other options if necessary.
Okay, I got 2 minutes, and I thought I'd ask you both. When we connected, I've known Ralph for a long time, but we connected in this organization, CARE, a couple of years ago, I guess. And I wonder, what's one thing you've learned that you didn't know 2 years ago?
How bad the conversation was broken amongst all the CISO, CIOs, CTOs, CFOs, and CEOs, and the complacency that they put in. Last quick story we had a private equity company. We did a complimentary review of their policy. A CFO was very smitten to Ralph, thinking they had the best policy in the world. They were going under an M&A. And the
That'll
first thing
do it.
Ralph did, look, oh yes, we were looking at the exclusions, and Ralph pointed out literally 14 exclusions that they didn't have coverage for, that they thought on the declaration, the front page listing their coverages, that were not covered. He turned white and literally brought us in saying, "You sold me, help me," and I apologize. So some of that is the communication. I think that's the biggest one. Would you agree, Ralph?
I would, and what I have learned in the last year and a half is that there are so many more people in the security industry, thousands. And then over here, where we're sitting and what we're doing, there are few, right? We're not writing insurance. We're not writing security. We're just assisting, right? We're trying to make sure that everyone gets it right. But and not a play on words, but sometimes people just don't care. I mean, it's the CARE acronym is cyber assessment, cyber insurance assessment, and risk evaluation. Right? That's the acronym we use because we want to make sure you're good on both measures. But sometimes it's just like it's such a silo effect in the mid-sized companies that hey, I'm good, we're good, but do you really care if? I mean, does the CISO care if there's enough insurance? I don't know. So that's why we all have to play together. We all have to get our cards on the table and say, look, if we don't have enough insurance and the company goes under, well, guess what, Mr. CISO, you're out of a job too. So we need to all put our heads together and make sure that we're good moving forward.
Richard, this has been really enjoyable. I want to thank you for having us on.
Yeah, thank you all, and you did a good job. We didn't lose. We lost one person. Everybody else stayed for the whole time, so that means you guys must have been relevant. Here is a reminder. You can visit these guys' website at care-report.com and get started on what I'm sure will be a big step forward in your risk assessment program. And for us at AwareForce, engage employees and check us out at awareforce.com. Our thanks to everybody for being here and for the questions. And y'all have a good, safe rest of the day.